Welcome to the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neal, and I'm joined by director Zach Passero. How do you say your last name? Passero.
Passero.
Passero. I should have asked.
Yeah, Passero works too. Right. I'm easy.
Yeah. But so you made Weird Kidz, which is premiering this Friday at Brooklyn Horror Film Festival, and not just because you're here. I love this movie. I thought.
Oh man, thank you. I'm glad. Thanks for watching it.
Yeah, it had. Well, you explain what the movie's about, and then I'll tell you what I thought of it.
The movie it's kind of a coming of age picture. I mean, I came of age in the late 70s and the 80s into the 90s, and so it's a movie about growing up during that time, but also kind of how the movies and the music of that time influenced us as kids, and kind of what the adventures you'd go on and the imagined adventures you would go on. And so it's kind of like this hyper real adventure that these kids go on. There's three kind of preteen kids, Doug, Fat, and Mel. And Doug's big brother is taking them on a weekend camping adventure into the desert with his girlfriend, Mary. And, Mel and Fat are well on their way to the doorway of puberty, and Doug is kind of the late bloomer in the group and is more interested in going out shooting fireworks and having fun and hanging out with his brother. And his brother is more interested in impressing his new girlfriend, basically. And they go out, and along the way, kind of run into some locals that hint that there might be this creature running around, but it's also, maybe it is just a campfire tale. And they kind of find out how real that is and what that means for them.
Yeah, because I was really into it right from the start, even before any horror stuff happens, which I think that makes all the horror stuff that more interesting, because you actually care about the characters. When things start to happen to them, you're invested in it.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. Absolutely. And I wanted it to be a little bit of a surprise. I think that the way that the design of the first 20 minutes of the movie, you're not too sure that horror element's going to kick in.
Yeah. Well, because I was watching it and I was like, I assume they sent it to me because it's without your head horror. And then I'm watching, I'm like, maybe it isn't horror related, which I'm totally fine with. I have people on that aren't always horror, and I was into it. So, but it was a pleasant surprise, and you can't always go in totally blind into a movie.
No, and that's one of those things. It's hard as a filmmaker. You want everybody to go in blind on some level, because you're like, I want everybody to be surprised, but also you kind of need people. you can feed people a little bit here.
Yeah. That's one of the things I liked about festivals, though, is you go in not knowing really too much about a movie.
Yeah, festival audiences are great because there's kind of an openness. You trust that the festival programmers have come up with just a fun lineup, some things that might be different than you would be expecting, but also that, you're more likely going to enjoy.
Yeah.
So I love festivals.
Yeah. I was born in 76. So this is very similar to like when I was a kid. And I think it's popular now to do a lot of stuff set in the 80s. And I think I like a lot of that stuff, but a lot of it seems kind of fake nostalgia, where it's just like, here's a Rubik's Cube and here's stuff that, was cool in the 80s. But this to me feels like, it feels more like something. It seems more real, even though it's an animated movie.
Oh, good. No, I was hoping. I didn't want to. Yes, it's nostalgic from its inception for me. It came to me as I was on the cusp of fatherhood. Like, my wife and I were going to have a baby, and all of a sudden this weird perspective shifted. I'm like, oh no, there's this little one is going to have a childhood, and they're going to experience these things. And I started thinking about the things I went through, good and bad, but also like the things that made me excited, and that one day I'll have to explain what this was, and like the movies that I liked and stuff like that. And I was like, wait a minute, there's a story in here. And it sparked all these memories of how I grew up, the adventures I went on, the people I was around, the things we were influenced by, the things we imagined, and that became
pre-internet. You had to imagine things. You didn't just
absolutely.
Yeah, I played a lot of D&D, and
yeah, no, exactly, absolutely. Yeah, I think we were born around the same time, same year pocket there.
So it was interesting. I looked you up after watching the movie to learn more about you. And first I knew that the movie took 8 years, and I think I saw that your son was like 8 years old, your oldest son. And yes. So I thought that was interesting. So over that time making it, how does your perspective change? Because, it's right when you're going to have a kid, and then you actually have a kid who's, 8 years old.
I think that it was really interesting. And now I have 2 kids, which is crazy. Like there was so much life that happened. Like the pandemic happened, life happened, births happened, deaths happened. It was a weird scope. But the thing that happened, and I think it kept me constantly engaged, was, the inception, everything was like this need to have something to share with my kid when they were old enough. And then so I was really interested in like the kid's story and Doug's story, and Doug is very much what I was like at his age. And then as parenthood kicked in kind of a little more full force for me, I was starting to get more to stuff with the night child, and parenthood had a different perspective on me. And so I started kind of, without giving away too much of the movie, started kind of almost thinking of this creature's perspective.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And it made me maybe more sympathetic to her than I was maybe even in the writing. And so I just had a lot of fun with it, and just how, and then I also realized as being a parent, I started realizing how strange, I mean, people are strange in general, but like adults are really strange, especially to kids and things like that. And so like, it was kind of fun to, as more adult characters entered the story, to kind of like play with what that meant, and those perspectives. Yeah.
And when people say it takes 8 years to make a movie, some people think like you're sitting there for 8 years nonstop, but can you just explain like, why it does take so long to finish something?
It took this long because, I had this romantic idea. It's from when I was a teenager. I wanted to make an animated feature, like myself or with like my best friends, basically like this insular bubble. And it just seemed really romantic to me. And that was kind of came along with this realization of, I keep going back to it, but if parenthood, thinking back on the things I've done creatively. I've been really fortunate to be a feature film editor, and I've gotten to work, very closely with like Lucky McKee, one of my best friends, and Bob Kurzkowski, and a bunch of great filmmakers coming forward. And I love that I've gotten to do those things. I feel very fortunate, but I was like, man, I never, I'm in my late 30s at this point, and I never made that feature film. And so by design, it was like, okay, we're making this insular thing. And my wife and I, had already done short films together where she's an artist. My wife, Hannah, she painted backgrounds for short films and commercials and things that we would get hired to do.
Which I saw she also credited for the background in this. Yeah.
Yes. And so we decided, we're like, we'll do this together. Like, you're pregnant. We're nesting. Like, this is something we could do like really quaintly, and not understanding like, yes, we're going to be raising a family in the middle of this. And so all of a sudden, this idea where we can dock this out in 2 or 3 years starts to expand, because it's like, oh, well, we also, I'm not independently wealthy or anything like that. I cannot afford to just focus on on animating and her painting for us to just complete this film. I had to work. And so I took editing jobs and worked on editing some films. And so it became that I was working on Weird Kidz and animating, after I had spent a day editing and after I'd gotten the kids to bed. And I would, ever since I was a little kid, I only slept like 4 hours a night. And so I was like, well, this is a good advantage. I can, kids go to bed, and then I'm just going to sit down and animate. And so, it stretched out over time, but in a weird way, I think it was for the better, because each step of the way, like something new set in, some new inspiration, something new was learned. I became a better animator, and halfway through it, my animation technique changed. And so I actually, as crazy as it sounds, went back and started reanimating some of the beginning of the movie to match where we were going from there forward. So it was an undertaking, but it also just became important to me to finish it well and make sure that by the time, if we're taking this on, like, let's get out on the other side of it and have something we're proud of, that, that people can enjoy, and that it just wasn't just done to get it done.
It's like kind of a technical thing about the animation. You said it's hand animated, and I think you could see the line marks in the characters, which the original concept for our website when we started in 2006, it was all hand drawn. My brother did caricatures for all the guests, and then I would color them in. And so I would always scan them and pull out the lines, and I could notice that in the film. Once we started doing weekly and lots of guests, it was too hard to keep up.
That's a lot to keep up on. That's ambitious. That's really cool.
But yeah, for the first 3 years, but after that, we kind of
no, that's a long run. 3 years, holy cow, man!
Yeah.
That's good.
But no, that really adds a lot of charm to the movie.
Oh, good. I hope so. I think that by the time, I think there's always an adjustment period in any film you sit down with. I think animated films are a little different. That you have to get, like, your brain is adjusting to the way that, like, the aesthetic is laid out, kind of maybe for the first 5 minutes. But I think once you get into the groove with how the aesthetic and the universe that's being set up in front of you, I think there's a way to settle in and have fun.
So if you're, making this over a long period of time, how about the cast, or like how early on do they get on board, and do they stay with it, the whole period?
Well, the cast, honestly, the cast, we got on board soon after finishing the script, and kind of went straight into, this would have been, early 2016. Wow. And that summer, that spring I started animating, and I had finished the script, and Lucky McKee and I had kind of workshopped it together and cleaned it up and kind of gotten it in fighting shape. And then spoke with Ellar Coltrane and Sean Bridgers and Angela Bettis, and all kind of the people that rounded out the cast. My sister, who ended up playing Doug, Tess, and Glenn Bolton, Brian Seeley, Sydney O'Donnell. And I got them all in during that about a month-long period to record. And it was important to me because I felt like the performances and the voices, I could focus just on that. I took a break up from animating during that time and just focused on directing the voice performances, and then I could use those performances to kind of help me push forward while I was animating, because they do dictate so much of the personality and what you want to do with the motion of the performance.
I wonder if does that work both ways? This would be more a question, I guess, for the actors. Like, do they get to see themselves, their animated self while they're performing?
By then, I had early conceptual animations for everybody. And so I did kind of make sure they could see what their character looked like. And then as I would animate, it was just kind of like, because it was taking so long to, it'd be like, hey, like these little reminders of, here's a little taste. I'm still working on this. What do you think? And kind of getting feedback along the way. And that would kind of inform my excitement or kind of the direction I took things.
Yeah. You mentioned Lucky McGee, who produced the movie, and we see the May poster back there. So
yeah, we have an office space together, and that's the room.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
Edit and animate and things like that behind us.
So for people who don't know, you've worked with Lucky for a while.
Yes. Yeah. We met each other in film school. And
cool.
And we would work on. We had a group of people. We'd work on one another's short student films together and things like that. We all just kind of our circle has gone out to the world and is now working, and we keep working with one another. And so it's kind of cool. So I've known him for almost 30 years, which is insane.
Yeah. And you mentioned doing editing, and from my experience doing the show, I know a lot of independent filmmakers, and most of them do something else to help make their own movies. And I've noticed that the people who do their own editing seem to be better at editing their own stuff than people who don't, because I think they look at it as a film, like as a job, as opposed to like they get attached to certain things and then they don't want to take that out of it.
And then I agree. As an editor at this point in my life, I've been doing it long enough to where, I'll get sent scripts sometimes for projects that I'm going to be a part of. And it's like, you start reading things, you're like, oh, that's totally going to be a deleted scene at some point. You kind of start pre-editing. Because the editing process is another part of like the rewriting process on some level. And it informed Weird Kidz in a way. I think it was, really helpful with writing when I was writing the script. It's kind of like, reading back, going through things. When I workshop, Lucky and I would workshop it, like going through it, reading everything out loud, and it'd be like, okay, I feel like this scene is over now. Kind of like the editor gut would be like, we're done here. We don't need to go on for another 3 pages or 1 page. And so I started pre-editing the film, even at that writing stage. And then as I was animating, the first 5 scenes, I meticulously storyboarded them out. And I realized like, I got through the storyboards and I was like, I took almost 2 months storyboarding these. It's like I could have been animating for 2 months. So and I was like, if I'm doing this by myself, this is going to take even this too long. So I started getting to like a routine where, I edited scene by scene, like in a linear fashion. And it got to the point where I was like starting to rely on just what I've learned from editing. And it's like, I'd finish a scene, I'd edit it together. And then it'd be like, well, where does this feel like it goes in relation to the script? And that would inform, I'd start doing just like crude thumbnail boards. And there were times I re-edited dialogue based on what was recorded or shuffled things around to make things more sense. So I was always like pre-editing before I animated, because I was also like, well, I don't want to animate things I'm going to throw away.
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking that when you're talking about it, because it's not like if you film something on film, you can just not use it. But why animate something that you're going to cut out? Yeah.
No, I went down that road a few times. There were a few times where I actually, just because I like the exercise of it when in live action is like, just those, if we were recording our conversation, like there'd be a camera. Right now there's a camera on you and a camera on me, and then we would like cut back and forth between them. And so I would animated like all of one side of the conversation, including reactions, and then all the other side. Like they were like full takes, and then edited conversations like that sometimes. Just because I enjoyed it and I liked that leeway to be able to cut to the other character and get a reaction.
That's interesting. Yeah,
I tried weird little things. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. You like editing? I know it's a weird question, but
no, I love it. It actually, as much as I finished, truly put like pencil down about 2 weeks ago on Weird Kidz with my own little meticulous, obsessive things. And I've been kind of like uncertain of what to do with myself on some level, and I miss animating, but I also I'm really excited for another editing project, another film to edit. So the puzzle is so fun. I love it.
So I have to mention scrote, because I never heard scrote as a word until the Wonder Years, which the Big Brother used to scrote a lot. And was that something that people used when you were a kid, or maybe it depends what part of the country you're in?
I think it might be a regional thing. I did hear it a lot, and it did usually come from older brothers when it comes down to it. And maybe and maybe the Wonder Years introduced that at some point. I thought it would have been mid to late 80s, I guess. But yeah, no, I definitely heard scrote. And then there's a couple of words I wanted to use where like the meanings have changed over time from what it meant like as a kid to actually an adult and now, whereas it's like that will not track. You can't explain that. People will be confused, sort of things.
Right. Yeah, I know. I'm sure everyone listening of a certain age know things that we used to say as kids that is not good to say now. But we didn't really necessarily mean them that way at the time.
No, and then there was just words that just the meanings changed, like just straight up, like that doesn't even make sense. It's not offensive or anything like that. It just
right, which is kind of fun. But yeah. How about the song? Because the song is played multiple times throughout the movie, and I'm a big fan of. It's like Dwayne. Is it Dwayne?
Dwayne, yeah,
his rock song.
Wyatt's rock. Yeah. There's a part of me, I think growing up, becoming a young adult in the early 90s, there was a lot of DIY music, DIY musicians, which was a lot of fun, and people recording things on 8-tracks. And I'm guilty of that myself, and fancied myself a musician. And there's something there that's that beautiful, kind of innocent inception of like, I'm going to record a song right now. This is awesome. And I'm going to have a band. And I kind of liked that Wyatt had that, even though it was kind of also influenced by the music he was listening to. Like it was kind of like hardcore dude, hair metal rock, basically is kind of what he did, which not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just, to him, it was like, well, this is how I'm going to get girls. And this is how I'm going to impress this girl that I'm, traveling with. I'm going to write her a song. And so it's a little informed by what he's listening to, and then a little misguided just by his own interpretation of things. But I love that idea of just recording songs and sharing them with people.
I think it really works because fun. at first you just think it's like bad, but there's a little, it's kind of catchy when you hear it over and over. So there's enough enough there that it's like, oh, you could listen to it, but at the same time, I think you could go over the top, make it really bad, and it'd just be like, well, no one would even think this was good.
Totally. And then at the end, the composer Sean Spillane, who used to be he's an amazing rock musician himself. Used to be in a band called Arlo back in the day, and he did all the songs on The Woman, all those amazing tracks. That he went back and did kind of like a souped up version of Hey Girl. The song is called that Wyatt does, that as if like he had gone, and Wyatt at some point in the future got to go into like a real studio and kind of dress it up. And it kind of goes, and he took it that extra edge and turned it into like a pop song. And it's like, hey, this is catchy. It's fun.
Yeah. I like the Wyatt character because at first you think he's like a bully and he's not likable at all. But like as the movie goes on, like he has a good side. He's not an all bad character, which that makes him more realistic, I think. Totally. And also explains why the girl would like him too.
Yeah, no, and that was the thing. I didn't want there to be that question,
because otherwise, like, why has to be here?
And he is a big brother, but he's also, there was a thing. I mean, there still is. You grow up, and while you're growing up, you start taking in these ideas of the way you're supposed to be acting, or the way you're supposed to be presenting yourself to be, cool, or a band, or a woman, or any of whatever it means to be these things, based on what's happening around you and what society is saying, I guess. And so that there's this part of Wyatt that's thick into like trying to just be something at the beginning of the movie that you kind of start, as it lets it down, you're like, oh no, Wyatt's cool. He's one of my favorites, actually.
Yeah, no, he's great. I like that he kept it fairly small cast, which I think works for the movie. There's more people later on, but for the most part, like the core people, it's a small group of people.
Absolutely.
And once the horror stuff comes in, that's great too. The monster, I don't want to give stuff away, but it looks awesome. And like you said, like you actually feel some empathy for it later on in the movie.
Yeah, that's, a lot of my influences when it comes to creatures come from like, 50s movies, like the Universal monsters in the 50s, and even in the 70s, like these creatures that you're like, there's a little more method to them than just madness and monster, right? Or there's something that you can identify with. And sometimes, especially, the old Universal, but
any of them
monsters
really
are actually not the monsters.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Frankenstein, he's not the monster's not the monster. It's the doctor, really.
Yeah,
and Creature from Black Lagoon. I mean, it's just we're disturbing his area.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, and Creature was one of the first. I think it was the first monster I was actually aware of as a child. When it comes down to it, there's actually a poster of Creature in my office.
Very back there. One of my first guests was Ben Chapman, who played the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Wow.
And he sent me an autograph thing, so I have it up there. But great guest, passed away not long after the interview, but amazing guy.
Oh man,
that's and I love the movie too. Yeah. He played the land scenes, and Rico played the underwater scenes.
Nice. No, that's really cool.
Yeah, Rico's still around.
Wow.
Yeah. So Friday is the premiere. So you've not seen Weird Kidz with an audience yet.
No,
or did you see it with maybe like a cast?
We haven't even done like a real cast and crew screening. So this is going to be my first experience. Hannah and I are going out to New York. It'll be our first experience after 8 years of her painting backgrounds and 8 years of me animating and editing. And then Andrew Smedick, our sound designer, is going to be there. It's going to be our first time sharing this with an audience. So it's really weird just suddenly, it seems like it happened really quickly. It's like, oh, it's done. Oh my gosh, we're gonna watch this in the audience. It's gonna be. I'm really excited. Of course, anxious as hell, but I'm really excited to watch it with an audience because that's when it's really gonna hit.
Yeah, of course. I don't like to make this about me, but in August, I finished my first feature. Well, my first feature premiered at a festival, so it was the first time watching it with an audience. And so I can relate to the idea of it's very exciting and it's also very nerve-wracking at the same time.
No, totally. Yeah.
Right. And we'd started not 8 years ago, but it did take 2 or 3 years because of the pandemic.
Wow. No, congratulations. That's huge. That's and those first experiences with an audience, I mean, you learn so much too. I mean, there's things that make you really happy, and there's things that burn, and there's things that,
you hope they laugh at the right places and don't laugh at the wrong places. And
totally. Yeah. No, but it's all informative moving forward. It's great.
Yeah. I really recommend it. I loved it. I posted on my Facebook, and again, not just because you're here, but I think it's a great movie.
No,
I love the whole thing. I think it's got a lot of heart to it, and it's fun to even just watch, but the characters are all, it makes me feel nostalgic, and then the horror stuff, it's kind of like maybe Dragnet, the movie. I don't know. There's a lot of different movies that I could compare it to, but it's definitely original too.
I'm glad that you liked it. I appreciate you just sharing the word and having me on and all that.
I get a lot of screeners. I don't want to name names. No, a lot of them aren't the best, but when something comes along I really like, it's nice to tell everybody to check it out.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I like if something makes me excited, like, and that's the thing. It's like I love movies, and I love just seeing what people create. And it's like, if somebody makes something that makes you excited, like, share it, tell people, get other people to see it. Like that's just part of the fun of life.
Yeah. So you're doing the during pandemic and everything, did everyone record their audio like in a studio, or did they do it like at their own place and have to send it to you?
We made a little makeshift studio in Lucky's house. Actually,
okay.
we were able to get it in before the pandemic hit, which was nice. So we did it all in person, and Andrew Smedick, who ended up doing the sound design and the mix on the film, did the recording. So we knew we had good that it was nailed and it was sounding good, and so we were really fortunate. I'm glad I got to do that in person, just because that energy is important.
Yeah. All right, very cool. I'll have the link to see it this Friday at the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival. And where can people follow to see like where it goes from there?
Let's see. I am on Twitter as a Western Ghost, and I would be setting up a Weird Kidz Twitter, and there's a Weird Kidz Instagram. If people follow that, you can look up the Weird Kidz animated, and we're also on Facebook. So there's a way. Still getting myself organized, but also and please, please come out and watch the film if you're out in that area. It'd be great to have you.
Yeah, it's cool to watch stuff on the computer at home, but to me, there's no better way to watch anything than on the big screen, especially with a lot of with people who like weird stuff like yourself.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks. It was very cool to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you, Neal. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too.